Good morning. Thanks for hanging around. Lee and I were looking around this morning and noticed a lot of empty pews today. And of course, I think this is fall break, for Sumner County. Next week is fall break for Davidson County. So one of the things when I came to Hendersonville 3.5 years ago, John Micah told me was when fall break comes, Hendersonville leaves. And he said, you'll look up and you'll go, where in the world is everybody at? And they're headed different places to go on vacation. And so that's what happens. June and I will be out next week ourselves. We're going to be heading to see grandkids up north. And so Lee will be taking it solo. And I know he'll do a great job with that. We are continuing our series on the Sermon on the Mount. And again, kind of the theme verse. We've been reiterating this one over and over and over again. Our righteousness has to surpass that of the Pharisees and teachers of the law, not in quantity. That's the thing you got to realize. Again, it's not that we need to work more than they worked. It's that we need to go to the heart and be the heart of what God calls us to be. It all is about the heart. It's about faith. It's about believing in God and honoring God with our actions. And so he's really driving that home. And so last week we launched into Jesus and possessions and just talking about the role that these possessions have. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Lee, and let you just kind of walk us through the next 2 or 3 slides because you did some really good summary notes on this one.
Okay. So this is from worldbank.org, and these are from 2018. Just to put things in perspective a little bit, when we think about our situation, how we compare with the world. In 2018, it was estimated that approximately 46% of the world's population, that 3.4 billion, lived on less than $5.50 a day. 26% of the world's population, just under 2 billion, were living on less than $3.20 a day. And that's considered poverty. Now, they've got another statistics for abject poverty. This is just poverty. And so you stop and you think about that, and we start and think about ourselves a little bit. But if you've ever been to other places in the world, third world countries, don't always have to go to third world countries, obviously, but the times I've spent when I've been in Mexico, which is not considered a third world country, but I've been in Mexico, been in Brazil. Brazil was a fascinating place because the city we were at, Belo Horizonte, and we were taken to one place where you saw these multi-million-dollar homes. I mean, huge houses. Then there was a fence with barbed wire. There was glass above the barbed wire. I mean, there was anything and everything to keep people from crossing one way or the other. And on the other side, almost next door to these, were just huts and just nothing. And so you had these two huge extremes of what was going on. But, when we think about what the world deals with and how the world lives, for the most part, and we compare ourselves, we stop and think about what it is that we have.
And notice it says less than $5.50 a day. Not everybody's making $5.50 a day. Now I want y'all to think, if you're making $5.50 a day, Lee, my math's not real good, $15,000 a year, would that be accurate?
No.
Or am I off?
No, you're way off there.
$1,500 a year?
Something like, let's see, let's just say $5 a day. Okay.
$5 a day.
For 30 days is what, $150?
Yes.
And so multiply 150 by 12.
Okay, so it's, about 1,700.
Yeah.
So imagine if all you got a month was $1,700. I mean, could you pay your bills? I know people couldn't pay their cable bill.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I remember several years ago, Lee, a lady came to us and said, could you help me with a bill? And I said, well, what do you need? And she said, well, we're behind. We're really bad behind. In fact, we're 8 months behind. We owe over $800 on this bill. And I said, okay. She said, I've got another church that'll pay half of it if I can find a church that'll pay the other half. And I said, okay, what's the bill for? And she said, my cable television. And I said, no, we don't pay for cable television. And I thought to myself, who in the world? And then I wanted to know who the other church was, because I thought, I need to go to that church. They'll give you money for your cable television. When you think of how poor, and then again, you said last week, when we look at how wealthy we really are compared to the world, we're up in the very top percentage.
Oh, yeah. And you think about it. Think about what you and I have. And I'm looking at myself as much as I look at anybody. We've got good food in abundance. We've got safe water at our fingertips. Well-built houses. We've got money in the bank. We've got numerous vehicles. We have emergency personnel that we can reach, just with, using our cell phone, dialing 911 right away. We've got stacks and stacks of clothes in closets, in storage bins, whatever. We were at a estate sale yesterday, and just went in and see, and they had so much stuff that was still there. Normally by Saturday, because normally those things start on Thursday, but we went out on Saturday, and there was still so much stuff. But stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks of clothes, just everywhere.
And think about how quickly we have gotten to where we are. That's the thing we need to understand. You see, if I could go back to my grandparents' generation, if I could go back to them, they would have been, maybe one truck by then. At my age, my granddad, finally had a truck. The house they lived in, the house I have, there was a wood plank siding. Had been an old dog trot house, if you know what a dog trot house is. It's an old southern dog trot house. My grandparents, they couldn't lock their doors. In fact, you could walk in, literally just a screen door is all they had. You could walk in anytime and go into my grandparents' house. They didn't have cell phones. They did have television. I look at just and of course, if I go back earlier in my grandparents' life, then, I think about the fact that when my dad was a child growing up, like my grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, my dad had no electricity, no indoor plumbing, one pair of shoes a year, which was Brogan boots, clothes were made out of flour sacks. They lived in a house that you had to heat with firewood. They still plowed with mules. That's y'all 3 generations. We've gone from that to where we are today. And by the way, do y'all remember churches back then? No air conditioning. Wouldn't y'all love to be in here without air conditioning? By the way, if we were in here without air conditioning, what would we be using? Funeral home fans. Come on, some of y'all remember those. By the way, younger generation don't have a clue what we're talking about. Funeral home fans? Yeah. Used to, in the old days, the racks weren't for songbooks. They were for funeral home fans. And churches had them just stuffed in there all over the place. And, of course, the Lord's Supper had to be covered with white cloth to try to keep the flies off of it because the windows would be open. And how many times do you remember sitting there watching during a sermon as a red wasp landed on the lady's hat in front of you? And you're thinking, it's going to get her. It's going to get her just sure as the world. That was the world of, 70 years ago.
We used to have right as soon as the preacher was going to get ready to say something that would be a, significant point, you look out the window, there's a rooster, and he just lets go. It seemed like it happened every time.
Yeah.
And like I say, I still remember when I was 6 years old, when my grandparents who lived in Ostella, Tennessee, which was near Cornersville, Tennessee, which is near Lewisburg, Tennessee, to kind of give you an idea of where it is. I still remember when they got indoor plumbing.
Yeah.
I was 6 years old. Of course, the telephone was still party lines. You pick up the phone, well, you couldn't necessarily talk to somebody or couldn't necessarily make a call because the party line was going on. You'd have to try to get somebody else off the phone if you could get in there. But it's true. I mean, the things that we look at now, I mean, my kids have no conception of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
No conception at all.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. And so when we think about all these things that we've accumulate, and I mean, I don't know about you, but I got books galore, thousands of books that I've got, religious books, other books. I mean, just books. I can I'll never be able to read all those again, But it just goes to show how well we've been blessed. I mean, just unbelievably blessed. But what is it we're doing? What are we doing with it?
Right.
And that's what I'm constantly looking at myself at, is what am I doing with what I've been given? Am I giving back? And when I'm giving back, why am I giving back? I hope I'm not giving back out of a sense of, well, I just got to. It's a case of, I want to.
Yeah. And which is what Jesus goes into. So take us through it.
Yeah. So don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth, vermin destroy, thieves break in and steal. You think about how many different things that could happen to your stuff that you've got. What could happen? It could be stolen. It could deteriorate. You could get lost in a flood or a storm of some sort. I mean, there's lots of things that can happen to our stuff, and so that's why we're not supposed to build our life around that. It's okay for us to use things. Unfortunately, too many times, I'm afraid we end up allowing the things to use us, and to control us. So Jesus, again, he lived for the most part day to day, like most of the people there. They lived day to day. But he was also aware of the prosperity. He was aware of the opulence of some, including a number of the religious leaders who were extremely wealthy and powerful. And so he realized there was this temptation for folks to want to reach for that. And at the same time, of course, as we know, he pointed out the hypocrisy of so many of the Pharisees. Don't try to be them. Listen to some of the things they have to say, but don't follow their life, because they're not living the way they should. But so many people would think, well, these people are religious people. They're godly people. Look at what they've got. That's what I want to have. That's what I want to emulate.
By the way, I need you to hurry up, because the Powerball is at the highest it's been in a long time.
Gotcha.
And I need to go buy tickets.
Did you not buy them this morning?
Yeah, y'all see the problem? I mean, have y'all noticed that, by the way? There we go. Did we do something wrong, Ken? Oh, we got too close together. Get over there, Lee. All right. But all you got to do is, and by the way, am I right on that? Powerball is really high. I was in a store yesterday grabbing a Coke, and it had a big sign up there, Powerball, one of the highest it's been in months. And of course, people now are scrambling, heading to the convenience stores, buying just ticket after ticket after ticket. Why? The very thing that Lee's talking about, that Jesus pointed out. People are reaching because they think that's what's going to make my life meaningful.
Yeah. Well, one of the most disturbing things that I shouldn't say most disturbing, one of the most concerning things that I still recall when I was working as a missionary in Scotland was, I felt like I recognized, you need to live like the people around you live. And yet, so many missionaries who came over from the United States, came over and worked with churches there, they would live in the most expensive neighborhoods, most expensive houses, drive the fanciest cars. And I'm just thinking, what are y'all thinking here? You're bringing, what you're doing, that may have been typical in the United States, but you can't, your influence, loses a lot of steam if you're living above, the people you're supposed to be working with and trying to serve. And I still remember one young man who, went, we were driving, we were going somewhere and driving past, a couple of houses where a couple of ministers lived for this one congregation, and he's like, man, I need to get into that kind of work. And I was like, oh man, it was bad, and it's just important for us to realize who it is that who we are and whose we are, and not get caught up in the ways of the world, because it's just so easy to happen. Again, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where thieves don't break in and steal. And so he reminds his audience that accumulating spiritual wealth is a far, it's not even comparable, far greater importance than the accumulation of physical possessions. Recognizing that what we need to strive for is to grow spiritually, to realize that, yes, our reward is great, but our reward is not based on this world. Our reward is based, on the future.
Yeah.
For, again, where your treasure is, rather, that's where your heart is. What are you going to do with it? What's motivating me? It goes back over and over again that Jesus looks at, not only in the Sermon on the Mount, but in so many of his teachings, attitude, heart. Your heart is what is going to motivate you. Whatever it is that's controlling you is what's motivating you. And we have to constantly I know I do. I have to constantly be looking at myself to see why it is I'm doing what I'm doing.
And Lee, if you just hang around with people, if we were just to spend a day with most people, we would see where their hearts are. Mm-hmm. And of course, one of the things that has always bothered me is with what do you do with what you accumulate when you die? What do you do with that? And I oftentimes want to say to people, the one thing you don't want to forget when you die is to be generous to God. I mean, that's the one person you don't want to forget. I remember June and I went to get our wheel done, and we've got to get it upgraded. We've not updated it in a long time. June's been after me for years now. Leslie, we've got to update our wheels. I mean, our youngest son, if we die, our oldest son becomes his, caretaker. Of course, our youngest son's 32 years old now, and I'm pretty sure he's not going to want that. At the time, he was 16. And so, but one of the things that June and I both realized is we probably are not going to need to leave what we have to our kids. Our kids don't need it. Right now, our kids are wealthier than we are. A lot of y'all have the same situation. Your kids grow up, and the next thing you know, they're getting paid salaries that you thought, how much? And God's just blessing them richly, and Jen and I are thrilled about that. We're so glad. But you know what? Our kids don't need more wealth. That's not what's needed. What is needed is the gospel of Jesus Christ needs to go more out into the world. And so Jen and I try to be very conscientious of how do we take if there's wealth left, and there may be none left. I've told my boys, y'all better put me in a nice nursing home when I get older. If you don't, I want to come haunt you. But I want a nice one, But seriously, as I've always told people, Lee, I don't know about you, but I'm worth a whole lot more dead than I am alive.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, my insurance, June would be well off if something happens to me, which is why I don't eat her food or drink she makes for me. I'm always suspicious about that stuff. But if we have wealth left over, we want it to honor God. And that's the first question. How will it honor God?
So, it just kind of sums it up. You've been raised with Christ. Set your heart on things above. That's where our focus needs to be. It's what Jesus constantly, focused on, talked about, encouraged, cajoled, anything he could do to get people to realize what's really important in life. Set your mind on things above, not on the things around our world. And again, I think that's sometimes where people sometimes get caught up in politics and stuff. They get so focused on one party or another party. I mean, God doesn't care if you're a Democrat or Republican or whatever. What He cares about is that you're a Christian. That you're a follower of Him, that you're striving to follow Him. Hey, political parties have tons of problems. I don't care whatever political party you want to talk about. They all have issues. None of them I would consider being in line with spiritual matters. I certainly wouldn't. I wouldn't be focused on that. What I've got to focus on is, what does God want me to do? How should I live my life? What's He calling me to be? And then making the best of the situations that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. All right. He moves next to an interesting issue, which is it's one of those verses that come out of kind of nowhere. You look at it and you go, what is he talking about here? The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. Okay, what in the world is he talking about? Well, first of all, you need to understand the way they got light back then. Lights were through little lamps. This is a typical first century lamp. You'd pour olive oil in it. You would roll up some cloth, stick it in as a wick, and then you'd light it. And of course, you see the hole in the very top. That's where the wick would go in. And as the wick burned, you would push more of the wick into the oil, and it would burn, and it would light up the room. That's why you got light. But he's talking about the eye not as a lamp, but as kind of the light of your body. So Lee, once again, kind of follow us through this.
Yeah. So first of all, the eye permits light or darkness, depending on what you're made of, as far as what your makeup is spiritually, to enter, to exit the body. It's almost like a camera, showing a film, if you like. Jesus continues his emphasis that what we're to focus on is the internal, again on the heart. And this is what's interesting. What I found interesting in looking at this was, are we healthy or are we unhealthy? The words used for healthy, hapless, and unhealthy, poneros, are words often used for generous and stingy. Yeah. He ties it all back together again. Something that his audience would pick up on much more quickly than I think we would. When we first look at that, we're just seeing it in English. We're like, well, I'm not really,
what's he mean by
what's
this
he mean by
eye
that?
of light? Yeah, watch this text out of Deuteronomy. Perfect example of what Jesus is talking about. Beware that there be not a thought in thy wicked heart. By the way, this is King James, because the NIV changes the original wording of it, because they're trying to give you the meaning of it. But we can understand the word. Notice, don't allow your wicked heart to say, the seventh year, the year of release is at hand, and thy eye be evil against thy poor brother, and thou givest him naught. Okay, let me translate that now into English. Okay, I know some of you are thinking, that is English, not Mississippi English. Let me translate Mississippi English. In the Old Testament, debts were canceled periodically, some at 7 years, some at 50 years. And so if you loaned someone money, that debt would be canceled on the 7th year, which caused a problem for people who needed money on the 6th year. Here's Donald here. Donald comes to me and says, Les, I'm struggling. I need to buy a seed to put in my field. Would you loan me enough money to buy the seed? And I'll pay you back. And I'm sitting there looking at Donald going, the problem with that is if Donald don't pay me back in 1 year, guess what I have to do next year? Have to cancel the debt. And so what Moses is saying is, don't look at your poor brothers who are asking to borrow money from you, and you're calculating in your head, all right, we just finished the 7th year. I've got 7 years to collect this debt. I can get it in 7 years. But, next year is when you cancel debt. I'm sorry, Donald, can't help you out this time. And so what am I? I've cast an evil eye against my poor brother. That's where that language comes from. So yeah, you're right, Lee, very common. But if your eyes are unhealthy, and here's that language that Lee mentioned a moment ago, if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. In other words, if your eyes are stingy. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? And of course, again, the role of the eyes for everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes. Our eyes, so much goes through our eyes, and they play that role. And if our eyes are not healthy spiritually, then we're not healthy spiritually, and vice versa on that. The eyes of your spirit allows revelation light to enter into your being. If your heart is, by the way, that says in NIV, that's not NIV, I apologize. This is the Passion Translation. If your heart is unclouded, the light floods in. But if your eyes are focused on money, that's what he's saying. And the Passion Translation gets it right. But if your eyes are focused on money, the light cannot penetrate and darkness takes its place. How profound will be the darkness within you if the light of truth cannot enter it? If all you're ever doing is calculating how much is that going to cost me? Here's somebody who needs help. First question you think of, how much is that going to cost me? Instead of really trying to help them, thinking about the person. If you're always counting the cost. You ever been to someone, go eat with someone who says, hey, order anything off the menu, and then they take you to McDonald's? By the way, I had a dear friend, and I'm not trying to be accusatory toward him, but I had a dear friend who we'd go out to eat, and he would wait until I ordered. And once he saw what I ordered, he would decide whether or not he was going to pick up the ticket. So I always ordered something cheap. And then sometimes he wouldn't pick up the ticket, and I'm stuck with cheap food. Yeah. But it was always funny, as to what he would do depending on what I ordered. Now, he was a very generous person. Don't get me wrong. He was a generous person. He was just one of those that always was calculating and was generous with what he gave. And so, again, how do you look at money with your eyes? Are you always calculating the cost? And by the way, how many people do you know who in 3 lifetimes, 4 lifetimes couldn't spend what they have? I know of people who, when I look at their wealth and I'm like, what are they going to do with it? Are they going to leave it all to their kids? Is that really what they want to do with it? By the way, do you think it's good to leave your kids with so much money that they go, whoo, I can take life easy. I can eat, drink, and be merry? Rich man in Luke's gospel.
Yeah.
That God said that's a fool.
Yeah, it's constant.
Yeah.
It's not so much, sometimes it's a case of how much is that going to cost me? And then other times it's a case of, well, how much can I get out of, a particular situation or event? What am I going to be able to get out of this? And again, it's the wrong attitude. When we give, and it should never be a case of expecting anything in return. And yet, unfortunately, that is what motivates some people, because they look at it as, okay, I'm helping them out, but they owe me.
Yeah.
And it's like, we should never have that kind of attitude. And yet, it's a tempting one out there for a lot of folks.
And it is a struggle. And let me say to you, y'all, and I know in family relationships, this can be incredibly difficult in family relationships. I've always said I don't loan money. I don't loan money. I give money. I'll give money all day long. And if you want to somehow return by giving some back, that's up to you. But if someone says to me, hey, could you loan me some money? No, but how much do you need? I'll give it to you. And so give, because if you give with no expectation of repay, if you get repaid, wonderful. If you don't, wonderful as well, because you've blessed someone's life. So Lee, he turns, and Jesus does something interesting, because he now elevates money to the level of idolatry. Mm-hmm. No one can serve 2 masters. You'll either hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You can't serve both God and money. Why?
As soon as you think you can, then you've made money your idol. it's just that way. You know, you cannot, if God's not first, then he's not anything, you know, in my life. He's got to be first. And if I start thinking, well, I can serve God, but you know, I'm going to go after this as well, as far as this is just as important. And we end up trying to justify it. Well, you know, if I do that, well, I'll be able to give so much more, you know, to God, or I'll be able to do so much more with this, or so much more with that. And over and over and over again, you see where it's never enough.
Yeah.
You know, people, you know, I still remember confession time. I enjoyed Mad Magazine when I was growing up. I don't know if you're from.
We didn't get those in Mississippi.
Oh, you didn't get those?
Yeah, we only got Happy Magazine.
Oh, you only got Happy Magazine?
Yeah, we didn't get Mad Magazine.
Okay. I thought maybe it was because you couldn't read. You didn't get magazines, but that was just...
that was another reason.
Yeah. But Mad Magazine, you know, it was a lot of satire, tons of satire in it. But it would have various cartoons and things. And I still remember this one to this day where it talked about, you know, this guy's talking. He said, you know, when I was young and I started out and I was making, you know, $10,000 a year. And I was, you know, I'm going to work hard, and you know, eventually I made it up to $25,000. He said, eventually gets to like, you know, now I'm a success. I'm making $100,000 a year. I've got 2 cars. I've got this. I've got that. And the very last very last panel in the cartoon is he's got this, you know, he's like, man, you know, if I could start making $200,000 a year, then I'll be happy. Then I'll be able to relax. Then I'll be able to do this. Then I'll be able to do that. You're never satisfied. It becomes your God, and it can never be filled.
Ecclesiastes says, if you love money, you never have enough money. That's simple. And by the way, you want to see this illustrated? When I was a youth minister, Lee, I would get in a group of teenagers, and I would say, if God could give you one wish, and you could wish for as much money as you wanted, how much would you wish for? And what would always happen is the first kid would say, I'd wish for $1 million. What would the second kid wish for?
At least $2 million.
At least $2 million, exactly. Every time you'd ask a kid, they'd up the next one. Every one of them. Oh, if they're getting $1 million, I want $2 million. I want $5 million. I want $100 million. And here we go. And you start getting those numbers don't even exist. I want 3 zillion. I don't even know if a zillion's a number, but that's what they would go for. Keener is a writer, a brilliant New Testament scholar, and he's addressed this. So why don't you just kind of walk us through some of Keener's comments on this?
Okay. So he says, first of all, if disciples really trust God, they will live as if treasures in heaven really matter. That one hits me between the eyes often enough. Again, what's important? And if I'm thinking, as a Christian, what really matters? It's my eternal home. It's my spiritual home. It's my spiritual blessings. That's what matters. So if disciples really trust God, they'll live that way. People will be able to see it in their actions. They'll be able to see it in their words. They'll be able to see it in their attitudes. But those whose perspective is distorted by materialism, it's blinded them to God's truth. Again, just to reinforce, wealth in and of itself is not evil. It's not wrong. There's a lot of people who have used wealth for a lot of good. There's a lot of Christians who, frankly, God blessed them with the ability to make a lot of money. And I know them, and they used that money to bless a lot of people, to bless the spread of the gospel, to bless people who didn't have, you know. So wealth in and of itself, it's not wrong. It didn't say that money is the root of all kinds of evil. You know, it's the love of money that's the root of all kinds of evil. One either loves God or money. Those who think they can love both, you know, you got no chance. You're an idolater. You know, there's just no way that you can love both and still not have an idol, because that's what it is to you.
Yeah, this is one that says basically the same thing. Don't you know that when you offer yourself to someone as obedient slaves, your slave's the one you obey, whether you're slaves to sin, which leads to death, or to obedience, which leads to righteousness. You can't be a slave to both. Again, you obey the one you offer yourself over to obey. And in Genesis 29, well, this is, to me, has always been one of the saddest stories. You're in the story of Jacob. Jacob meets Rachel, falls in love with Rachel, agrees with Laban, Rachel's dad, that he'll work for a period of years in order to marry her. And then, the night of the wedding, Laban pulls the switcheroo. And instead of Rachel being behind the veil, it's Leah, her older sister, who's behind the veil. And I never have figured out how it took the next morning to figure that out. I don't know if y'all remember that. He wakes up the next morning, he rolls over, and there's Leah, and he screams. And Leah says, good to see you too. I mean, I never have figured that out. Other than Dad told her, don't say a word. Don't you dare say a word. You stay quiet. You know, on the honeymoon, you stay quiet. And so I never have figured that out. But y'all remember the story. And of course, you know, Jacob gets up and he's fighting mad and he goes to Laban and he says, you have deceived me. By the way, anybody remember what the name Jacob means? Deceiver. That's what Jacob means. Jacob deceived his father for the birthright against Esau. The deceiver, all of you named Jim. Jim is from Jacob, which means the deceiver. There you go, end of story. And so anyway, he goes and he says, you've deceived me. And he says, well, I tell you what, you work for a period of years again, and I'll let you have Rachel now. And that's what's so sad. Jacob made love to Rachel also, and his love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah. And he worked for Laban another 7 years. When the Lord saw that Leah was not loved. It's so sad. It wasn't Leah's fault. It wasn't Leah's fault at all. And by the way, Jesus came through Leah, not through Rachel. That's what's fascinating about it. But you see, even in a marriage relationship, these people who think, well, I can practice polygamy and it won't make a difference. No, you can't. Mm-hmm. You're going to love one, and somebody's not going to be loved. And this is a perfect example of it.
Yeah. It's tragedy. It's a tragic situation, and yet, as you mentioned, you know, it speaks to what goes on in our lives today in so many different ways.
All right, now we come to something. I tell you what, I'll grab it and kind of migrate through. Jesus and worry. Anybody in here worry besides me? Boy, isn't worry something? I mean, it's one of those things, because what you oftentimes move when you move from talking about wealth is talking about people who don't have wealth, and then you got to worry. Yeah. And let me just say that June and I both, when we first got married, we were poor. We were poor. We were poor.
You were Mississippi poor.
We were Mississippi poor. I had convinced June that we could live on love. June had agreed. We both were wrong. I remember we were at Freed Hardeman, and Lee, one time, we wrote a check. We were short, what was it, 20 cents, hon? It was like, how much? No, this was this was another time. Anyway, we were about 20 cents short in our checking account, and they charged us a $10 fee and bounced the check. And I was like, good night. And of course, I was preaching for $75 a week, and all at once, our eating money was gone for that week. And so there were times that, I mean, June and I, we would save all the pennies we could save in order just to be able to buy things. We sold all the books we could sell. You know, it was tough. And did we do a lot of worrying? We probably did far more than we should have.
Did you have some rock soup?
What's that?
Did you have rock soup?
We didn't have rock soup, but we had tomato soup.
Okay.
And for people who hate tomatoes, rock soup would just be as good. My mother canned tomatoes, and we had an agreement with our parents. June's parents supplied the crackers. My parents supplied the tomatoes, and that's what we lived on for a couple of years. Really was. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you'll eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? What's amazing about Jesus, and Lee, you mentioned this a while ago, Jesus lived a day-to-day life. He literally didn't know where the food might come the next day. And so when he addresses it, he says, don't worry whether you'll have something to eat. I think maybe last week we said, we don't worry about what we'll eat.
We don't worry about eating. We just trying to decide which thing it is we're going to eat.
Where are we going to eat at? I mean, today, many of us will leave here, and our question will not be, will we eat today? It will be, where will we eat today, right? You know, what are you hungry for? Mexican? No, I had Mexican yesterday. What about Chinese? No, I had that Friday. Well, let's go to Cracker Barrel. No, I had that Thursday. I mean, that's the way we live in our world today. Paul boiled life down to this. If you have food and clothing, that's all that matters. Y'all think about that one. Food and clothing. And you walk away going, wow. You know, what about a car? What about a house? What about a savings account? What about a 401k? What about Social Security? I mean, we can all fill in the blank. And Paul's sitting here going, really, if we, and Lee, I think you're right what you said earlier. For a huge number of people in the world, it does boil down to those two things.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why you oftentimes can see, the church, can often grows quickly in places where there is abject poverty, where there is a great deal of poverty, because those people can relate to that.
To Jesus' teaching.
And they're convinced, hey, I don't want to live on this earth forever, because this could be pretty miserable. It's already miserable. Is it going to get more, how's it going to get better? But when they realize and recognize there's something more, there's hope, beyond this world, then that is, that gives them hope and confidence and a for lack of a better term, a lust for spiritual life.
Yeah, James would say, has God not chosen the poor of this world to be rich in faith? So yeah, absolutely. And then Jesus says, by the way, let's just look around. Let's just use common sense. Look at the birds. They don't sow, they don't reap, they don't put in barns. Yeah, God feeds them. And by the way, God also feeds those that do reap and sow and put into barns. By the way, anybody ever notice what squirrels do this time of year? Man, isn't it fun to watch them? They're out there grabbing the nuts off the trees, going into your flower beds, going into your yard, digging little holes. I've always wondered, how in the world do they remember where they bury all that stuff? They got a map somewhere. They got a cell phone somewhere with a GPS saying, okay, that hickory nut is right over here, or that walnut is right over here. But they do it. They do prepare for the winter. Birds don't. And notice Jesus, are you not more valuable than they? You look outside. This morning I came in, right outside the window, right over here, right outside the office. Beautiful blue jay sitting on the ground eating. I don't know what he was eating, but he found something right there in that, in the mulch that he could eat. And God feeds them. Beautiful, beautiful story. Psalm 147:9, he provides food for the cattle and for the young ravens when they call. God meets our needs. And Lee, what about this one? What does worry do?
Well, personally, I've added 20 years to my life by worrying.
You've added, by worrying, you've added 20 years.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, it is a case, and we do. We worry about, and I say we generally, we worry about all sorts of stuff. The vast majority of which, either A, we have no control over, or B, never happens. But it consumes us. And when it does, we just find ourselves, we get frustrated, we get anxious. It causes health issues. It causes relationship problems. I mean, there's all sorts of things that worry does, none of which are good things.
Yeah. I had an aunt who's going to be with the Lord now, but she worried all the time. And I would see her, and Aunt Linda had a speech impediment. Had a speech impediment all of her life, and she couldn't say the letter L. And so I wasn't Leslie, I was Wesley, okay? And so I'd see her and I said, Aunt Linda, how you doing? Oh, Wes, we just barely making it. We just barely making it. And I say, well, you know, it's been beautiful sunshine lately. They, by the way, they lived out on the farm. I said, it's been beautiful sunshine lately. But we need to wane so bad. We need to wane. We don't get some wane, said our crops ain't going to grow. And I said, well, you know, they're saying rain later on in the week. Yeah, but when it does, it always wanes too much. We don't need that much rain. And she was just one of those persons that I don't care what you said, it wasn't good enough. And of course, what was so funny is when my dear Aunt Linda passed away, her and her husband, they were multimillionaires. I mean, they were worth a fortune. But it was always not enough, you know, and she was always worried about it. And of course, the sad thing is that oftentimes we worry about what we shouldn't, and then those things that hit us. And then we worry about, you know, health issues, which, you know, is always a challenge, you know. And like you said, instead of adding to our life, worry just takes it away. Our time is up. Again, thank you for being here. I'll be gone next week. Lee will be here, and he'll take off from here and deal with the judging issue. I'm so glad you're getting first few verses.
I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to get past verse 34.
Oh, you're not going to get past, okay, verse 34 in this one?
Okay. I'm confident by the time I review and everything,
Yeah.
and then I'll be gone, so then you can have it.
Okay. Let's pray together, y'all. Father, thank you so much for being our God. And Father, as we've listened to Jesus talk about wealth, we want to honor you. We don't want to worry, but we don't want to, at the same time, Father, take for granted all the blessings you've given to us. Help us to use all you give us to lay up treasures in your presence, Father, where we will spend eternity. Thank you for Jesus who makes it all possible. We pray in his name. Amen.